The Battle of Austerlitz, fought on December 2, 1805, stands as one of the most decisive and celebrated victories of Napoleon Bonaparte and is often regarded as a masterpiece of military strategy, not only for its outcome, but for the way in which Napoleon deliberately shaped the battlefield, manipulated his enemy's expectations, and transformed apparent weakness into overwhelming advantage. The battle took place near the town of Austerlitz in what is today the Czech Republic and pitted the French Grande Armée against the combined forces of the Third Coalition, primarily composed of the Russian army under Tsar Alexander I and the Austrian army under Emperor Francis II. In the broader context of the Napoleonic Wars, Austerlitz followed a period of intense diplomatic tension and military maneuvering, during which Britain, Russia, Austria, and other powers sought to curb French expansion after Napoleon had crowned himself emperor in 1804. Napoleon had initially prepared to invade Britain, assembling a massive army along the Channel coast, but when the Third Coalition formed, he swiftly redirected his forces eastward in a rapid and astonishing march that surprised and outmaneuvered the Austrians in the Ulm campaign, leading to the surrender of an entire Austrian army without a major battle. Vienna fell soon afterward, and the allied Russo-Austrian forces retreated into Moravia, where they regrouped and prepared to confront Napoleon. By late November 1805, the opposing armies faced each other near Austerlitz, and although the Allied forces slightly outnumbered the French, Napoleon held crucial advantages in command unity, troop experience, morale, and strategic vision. Napoleon deliberately chose the terrain and allowed the Allies to believe that he was weaker and possibly inclined to retreat, even abandoning the strategically important Pratzen Heights, a central elevated plateau that dominated the battlefield. This apparent concession was, in reality, a calculated trap, as Napoleon anticipated that the Allies, convinced of French vulnerability, would launch a major attack against his right flank in an attempt to cut off his line of retreat toward Vienna. On the morning of December 2, coincidentally the first anniversary of Napoleon's coronation, the battlefield was shrouded in thick fog, which concealed French troop movements and added an element of uncertainty to the Allied command. As expected, the Allied plan, largely influenced by Austrian Chief of Staff Franz von Weyrother, called for a massive, coordinated assault against the French right, where Marshal Davout commanded a seemingly thin and vulnerable line. The Allies believed that crushing this flank would force Napoleon into a general retreat, but they underestimated both the speed at which French reinforcements could arrive and Napoleon's intention to strike decisively at their weakened center. As the Allied columns advanced southward, descending from the Pratzen Heights into the foggy lowlands, they unintentionally stripped their own center of strength and cohesion. Napoleon, observing this movement from his command post, famously remarked that the enemy was giving him the battle he wanted. At precisely the right moment, once the Allied center was sufficiently exposed, Napoleon ordered Marshal Soult's corps to launch a sudden and powerful attack up the Pratzen Heights. Emerging dramatically from the fog into the sunlight, the French troops surged forward, catching the Allies off guard and splitting their army in two. This assault on the Pratzen Heights was the decisive moment of the battle, as it shattered the cohesion of the Allied forces and placed the French in a dominant central position. Meanwhile, on the French right, Davout's troops, reinforced by a grueling forced march from Vienna, managed to hold their ground against repeated Allied attacks, buying the time Napoleon needed to execute his central blow. On the French left, Marshal Lannes engaged Russian forces under Prince Bagration in a fierce and grinding struggle that fixed the enemy in place and prevented them from assisting the collapsing center. As the battle progressed, chaos spread through the Allied ranks, with Russian and Austrian units fighting in isolation, unable to coordinate effectively amid confusion, exhaustion, and conflicting orders. Napoleon exploited this disorder with relentless pressure, ordering cavalry charges and concentrated artillery barrages that further disorganized the enemy and prevented any effective regrouping. One of the most dramatic episodes of the battle occurred near the frozen Sachon ponds, where retreating Russian troops attempted to escape across the ice. French artillery fire shattered the frozen surface, causing men, horses, and equipment to plunge into the icy water, an event that later became a powerful symbol of the totality of the Allied defeat, even if its scale was somewhat exaggerated in popular accounts and propaganda. By early afternoon, the outcome of the battle was beyond doubt, and the Allied commanders ordered a general retreat, which quickly turned into a rout across the snow-covered countryside. The losses suffered by the Third Coalition were devastating, with tens of thousands of soldiers killed, wounded, or captured, while French casualties were comparably light. The victory at Austerlitz had profound and far-reaching consequences for Europe. In the immediate aftermath, Austria sued for peace, leading to the Treaty of Pressburg, which imposed harsh territorial and financial terms and effectively removed Austria from the war. Shortly afterward, the Holy Roman Empire, a centuries-old political entity, was dissolved, and Napoleon reorganized much of Central Europe into the Confederation of the Rhine, placing it under French influence and fundamentally reshaping the political map of the continent. The battle also elevated Napoleon's reputation to legendary status, reinforcing the perception of his invincibility and strategic genius both among his supporters and his enemies, and strengthening his authority within France itself. Militarily, Austerlitz became a classic case study in the principles of warfare, illustrating the importance of deception, flexibility, concentration of force, and the exploitation of enemy mistakes. Napoleon's ability to read the intentions of his opponents, to lure them into overconfidence, and to strike at the decisive point with perfect timing has been admired and analyzed by military theorists ever since, from the 19th century to modern military academies. Beyond its tactical brilliance, the Battle of Austerlitz symbolized the height of Napoleonic power, a moment when the French Empire appeared unstoppable, and when the old monarchies of Europe seemed unable to adapt to the new realities of mass armies, merit-based command, and revolutionary energy harnessed by an exceptional leader. Yet, in retrospect, Austerlitz also foreshadowed the immense scale and intensity of the conflicts that would continue to ravage Europe for another decade, as Napoleon's dominance provoked renewed coalitions and increasingly desperate resistance. Even so, as a single event, the Battle of Austerlitz remains one of the most studied and celebrated engagements in military history, not merely as a victory, but as a demonstration of how intellect, planning, leadership, and psychological insight can converge to shape the fate of nations on a single winter's day.